important to understand what the 5G is doing and what they say it's doing. We're told on the IEEE beamforming document that this technology cooked your eyes like eggs in World War II. And you all need to understand these are military weapons. These are assault frequencies. If you garner nothing more than that, that's what you need to know. It's microwave radiation warfare, is what this is.
You must consider the whole part played by electricity in nature. Human beings cannot go on developing in the same way in an atmosphere permeated on all sides by electric currents and radiations. It has an influence on the whole development of man. This life of men in the midst of electricity, notably radiant electricity, will presently affect them in such a way that they will no longer be able to understand the news which they receive so rapidly. The effect is to damp down their intelligence. Such effects are already seen today. Even today, you can notice how people understand the things that come to them with far greater difficulty than they did a few decades ago. Rudolf Steiner, 1924.
The data we're going to look at are all published science, testing results, or public standards. At the bottom end of the radiation scale of what's called power density or signal strength is the minimum level at which cell phones will work, which was found to be 0.2 billionths of a microwatt per centimeter squared. Pine needles were found to age prematurely at 0.000027. At short-term exposures of 0.05, children aged 8 to 17 experienced headache, irritation, concentration difficulties, and behavioral problems. 0.1 is the biobiology or building biology guideline for extreme concern. 1.0 produced sperm DNA fragmentation and a decrease in sperm viability in vitro. Also at 1.0, the science shows the following bodily effects can occur: headaches, dizziness, fatigue, insomnia, chest pain, difficulty breathing, and indigestion. 2.5 saw altered calcium metabolism in heart muscle cells. 4.0, changes in the hippocampus affecting brain memory and learning. And at 6.0, DNA damage in cells. So, where are smart meters on this list? Electrical Power Institute in December 2010 measured a single Itron smart meter with pulses up to 7.93 microwatts per centimeter squared. Our own testing indicated approximately 8.0 with 1 meter. These tests are at a close distance, approximately 1 foot away from the meter, but an infant's crib could be just as close on the other side of the wall where the meter or bank of meters are installed. Even though there are all these known health effects at levels far lower, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg see fit to set the standard at 9.5. And China, Poland, and Russia, 10.0. This is the same level at which behavior has been altered, producing reflexes of avoidance following 30-minute exposures. A room of 12 smart meters, very common and even a conservative number in an apartment building, tested at 19.8 microwatts per centimeter squared. This is hundreds of times higher than levels which clearly indicate harmful effects. So how can utilities and governments get away with forcing these devices on everyone? This is how. In Canada and the US and several other civilized countries, the safety limit is set at 600 to 1,000 microwatts per centimeter squared. This so-called safety limit is literally tens of thousands of times higher than levels which are known to damage health according to peer-reviewed published science.
So in our first slides, what we see is normal cells, and the structure of the cells is intact and sound. This is what we would expect from a normal sample. So after 2 minutes of exposure in front of the smart meter at about 1 foot away, we see a totally different story. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells, which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up, which makes it very difficult for the blood to deliver oxygen to the tissues as they would be their normal function. Every single one of these is a degradation. Every single one of these shows a trauma to the blood cells, and that came from something, and the only variable was the smart meter. The good news in all this is the patient and the blood can return to normal once they have been removed from the influences of these stressors.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
John Brandt.
Good morning, Mr. Brandt. Wow, this is Amanda from Virginia.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I've been trying to get a hold of you for months now. You guys are covering up chemtrails.
No, we are not covering it. We have no reason to cover up chemtrails.
Of course, you have every reason to cover it up. Every reason. It's called
What
losing your
reasons
job.
would that be?
Oh, well, you personally, you would lose your job if you were to reveal anything to me, and it's probably unsafe for you to even be speaking about this, considering the types of individuals you work for.
It's not unsafe.
It is unsafe.
There's no problem with us talking on. You're a citizen. You're making a complaint.
Oh, Lord, have mercy on myself.
It's a complaint in an area that we don't have authority to regulate.
For the last X amount of years, we've been through chemtrailing, and that is now the cat is out of the box. We've had these nanoparticulates raining down on humanity for years now, impregnating our bodies, by best accounts staying inside our bodies. Those nanoparticulates, what you're saying, are building up a kind of a phosphorescence glow capability so that we can be flagged up in our homes, behind concrete and steel, inside bunkers, in the basement, doesn't matter where you are. The 5G will be able to now triangulate, map and read you, because you as a living being are impregnated with these nanoparticulates, which are acting as a kind of transmission and reception technology.
It's exactly, absolutely exactly.
You have to consider that DNA also works as a fractal antenna, which is able to send and receive and also to process signals under the form of radio frequencies. Well, then there is no doubt that artificial radio frequencies, such as those of cell towers, and in particular these new types of towers that have a much higher density of signals, they may somehow interfere with the ability of DNA to retain and transmit biological signals. So this is one level of danger that very few biologists are aware of.
I think anyone who puts Wi-Fi into a school should be locked up for the rest of their life. I really do. I think they're not fit to walk on the surface of this planet because they haven't looked at the research, and whatever incentive they have, it is not worth the genetic problems that parents are going to face with their children when they're born.
France has banned Wi-Fi in nursery schools and put warnings out for regular schools because they're finding there's impaired learning capacity in children when they're around Wi-Fi. And they have to put up warning signs where they put Wi-Fi transmitters.
And replace them with wired network. The 4 top diseases that kill our children, our young adults right now, are brain tumors, thyroid cancer, testis cancer, rectal cancer, everywhere we put our cell phones. And a lot of our children are sick and they're being misdiagnosed and mistreated because the wireless industry has put billions and billions of dollars in the past 30 years to mislead the public as to the health effects and keep the public uninformed.
We are performing an experiment on children. We are exposing children to microwave radiation for 6 hours during every school day. We have had absolutely no studies looking at the long-term effects of this radiation on young people or even on adults.
A considerable amount of research shows that developing brains and bodies of children are much more affected than adults. And there are clear indications of a link between increased electromagnetic fields and autism spectrum disorders.
We took 10 autistic children and went back to the sleeping location where the mother was when she was pregnant with that child and compared it with the sleeping location of a mother that gave birth to healthy children. We had 10 mothers in that group, 10 mothers in this group, and in the group of the autistic children, we found that the measurements that we got for the microwave exposure was elevated compared to the group of children that were normal. The fetus is affected. The exposure to man-made electromagnetic fields has become the first factor that could be isolated ever in autism that could predict autism.
The 5th generation of wireless technology, or 5G as it's being rolled out worldwide without safety testing. Let me say that again, without safety testing. And how we've got scientists and doctors and environmental organizers saying, stop this. Because in terms of the effects of wireless radiation, the science is in. Wireless radiation can lead to cancerous heart tumors, brain tumors, DNA damage. Wireless radiation is linked to infertility, to autism, Alzheimer's, and more. And guess what? All the effects that I just listed, those are some of the effects that are known according to the technology that's being seen today.
First of all, you have to know that we know that the other EMFs that we're exposed to are already known to be health risks. And basically that 5G, because of the frequency that's going to be used and because of the extraordinarily high pulsation levels that will be used, is a much bigger threat to our health than the things that we already have, which are very substantial threats to our health. We're not just talking about the intensity. We're talking about the frequency and the very high level of pulsations. There's a huge literature which shows that pulsed EMFs, EMFs that pulse up and down very rapidly, are in most cases much more biologically active than our non-pulsed EMFs. Every single wireless communication device communicates via pulsations, but the industry completely ignores this issue. The problem with 5G is that they're planning to put out tens of millions of these antennae all over the place without doing one single biological safety test.
Are you implying possibly that we, the consumers, are the guinea pigs since they haven't really done tests to see the effects in a smaller setting?
I mean, that's not an implication, it's a statement. We are, yes.
Your embryo, your uterus in the fetus, where your child is developing for the first 100 days, in the ovaries, the eggs do not have that protection, so they are at maximum risk from radiation. And for the first month or so, you wouldn't even know you were pregnant. You wouldn't even be taking precautions. That is the main danger area. So you give birth to a daughter, but her ovaries are now contaminated. She may be normal, she may be genetically damaged, but her ovaries are at the most risk. So when your daughter grows up and she becomes pregnant and has a baby, this is where one of these eggs will be fertilized and come out. So the real damage here is your grandchildren. That is where it is going to show most.
This is not just an incremental change, this is a big step up. It's a sea change, and onslaught's not an improper word. It's a bombardment. So instead of a cell tower 1 mile or 2 miles from you, and you still have cell phone service, we're going to have antennas every block, and some poor soul is going to have one mounted to utility pole, maybe less than 20 meters from their home. So this kind of, invasive bombardment with this many antennas, I mean, just in 1 square mile, if you do the math, 1 per block and 16 blocks per mile, that's about 250 antennas per square mile. The millimeter wave is untested. Former FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler openly said that they don't plan to test.
We won't wait for the standards.
And then our appeal also addresses the fact that there's a plan to roll out 5G through satellites in low Earth orbit. So 20,000 satellites, which will cover every square foot of the planet with a 5G signal.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Night after night, politicians and other leaders were telling Americans that Sputnik revealed that we were at great risk.
Not just our pride, but our security is at stake.
If Russia wins dominance of this completely new area, well, I think the consequences are fairly plain. Probable Soviet world domination.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Connected devices for health applications, which I love, has the capacity to make people healthier, as I understand it, a lot of medical applications.
The industry is not asking the government for money to build 5G networks. They're asking us to cut the red tape that surrounds infrastructure deployment.
We cannot let today's red tape strangle the 5G future.
The red tape slows and sometimes stops the building of densified network facilities necessary for 5G.
As we continue our efforts to keep government out of the way, so that America can continue its leadership for America to win the race to 5G.
One path is the government regulatory path. The other path is the private enterprise free market, gales of creative destruction Schumpeter path. Have you ever heard that? Gales of creative destruction? It just means let it rip. The new replaces the old. Sometimes, look, we all believe in the 10th Amendment, but sometimes you have to override it. By the way, the 1996 bill permits that kind of override. We're not here to be completely heavy-handed, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And some of these states or cities that don't want to cooperate want to shake us down. We can't allow obstacles and barriers to stop this movement. That's all.
Okay, smart technology, smart meters, smart cars, not that smart, huh? What does smart mean?
Anything that has smart attached to it, secret militarized armaments in residential technology. That's where smart came from. And smart, every bit of technology that you see today has all been developed for either some type of battlefield, some type of intelligence gathering system, and obviously these developments have to be commercialised, and people have actually took them into their homes.
The definition of a smart grid is a wireless system that will fundamentally turn every single appliance in your home into the equivalent of a transmitting cell phone. That's every computer, every television, every furnace, every air conditioner, every coffee machine, every printer, every single appliance that you have in your house will eventually, in a smart grid, have an antenna that's embedded into it that will transmit your usage data to a smart meter on the outside of your home that will then transmit your usage data to another tower receiving that usage signal that will then go to the utility company for supposedly billing purposes. Not all signals will just be about your individual use. There will be aggregate meters that will bounce signal from house to house to house within a neighborhood that will then accumulate all of the usage data that will transmit that to the utility company. Now, what that will do is that the end metering system that is transmitting all of that data will be firing an RF signal at many, many times a second, which will increase the average homeowner's radio frequency radiation exposure exponentially.
This picture shows some aphids on the leaf of an orange tree shortly after radar equipment was installed at a nearby airport a number of years ago. I noticed that every few seconds, all the aphids would tense up in unison and do sort of a little dance, as you see in the picture. Upon further investigation, I found that the interval of time between the activity of each dance coincided exactly with the rotation of the radar rotor device at the airport, which was a distance of approximately 14 miles.
The takeaway is that 5G, the $1 trillion rollout of 5G by our friendly local government, is definitely a weapon system masquerading as a modern efficiency technology.
It most certainly is. And what I put it down to, it's economic terrorism. There is no value, nil, in killing off your population, in destroying your ability to grow food, to kill all your pollinators. They may have a nice financial number on a piece of paper, but in reality, dementia, diabetes, all the things that are currently crippling the NHS, a burden on the country, illness, mental health issues, the focus of that cause can be identified and has been identified in the science. The science is proven. The epidemiological data that we're seeing on the street is now substantiating that science.
The DNA inside you, the mitochondrial DNA, you can trace unchanged to your mother, her mother, her mother, right the way back to the beginning of the human race in Africa, the Stone Age. It is unchanged, the mitochondria, and that is being unchanged in your children, which means if you damage it, your child could be genetically damaged, then her child, and her child, and her child, forever. You are condemning the future generations of every single child.
It is an extinction event brought into our homes, into our classrooms, onto the high street, into the very cells and DNA in our human bodies. It is such a perilous threat that it is almost impossible to imagine, let alone describe. When the 5G signature goes live, it will tap into a multitude of satellites which are in geosat orbit around the surface of the Earth. Millions of surface antennas will pick up that signaling and will then scatter the signaling into hundreds and hundreds of millions of different micro antenna systems set up on street lamps and even in your home, which you're not aware of incidentally. The LED light bulbs in your home invariably contain the micro or nanotech lens flare capacitors which will receive the 5G signaling, and it will proliferate the 5G signaling everywhere by exploding the signal into billions of photons which will target everything all at the same time. This is stealth technology. This is invisible science. But what it means in simple terms is that you will be flagged up, visible, trackable inside your own home. Anywhere you move on the surface of the Earth, they will have a lock and load tracking capability over you. You will be visible to invisible masters, each one of us, all the time. Today, our governments and the corporate sector have managed somehow to infiltrate the mainframe of our civilization and are pushing through a $20 trillion infrastructural rollout without any, and I mean without any, health science running behind it. There have been no tests. your government and your health authorities are either in collusion on this matter of genocide and ecocide, or they're just damned stupid. And I would suggest it is the latter.
If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, and be sure to share.